Before we go on to the next part of our program, let me say a few words about the background of this interfaith dialogue. The idea of this dialogue came about when Simon and several of us from the University of Hong Kong want to find out, can interfaith dialogue among religious leaders help overcome the cohabitation's problem that Islamic, Jewish, and Christian communities regularly face? As we were discussing how we should go about conducting such a dialogue, we finally decided that we should approach this topic realistically. That is, we will not like to say that religions have nothing to do with violence, nor would we say that religions are solely responsible for violence. Finally, we decided on the name Religions and Violence, seeing it as it is. No makeup, no delusion, just as it is. We want to find out. What about me? I'm a Buddhist monk. Do I have an opinion on such a topics? The following is what the Buddha has to say about violence. He abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who hold on to such thoughts, hatred will never cease. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only with love. This is the eternal rule. With these teachings from the Buddha as my hidden agenda, I would like to invite our guest speakers and panelists to come on to start our panel discussions. Please. Before we start the discussion, I would like to introduce our panelists. First is Uzma on my left. She is from the Department of Law. And then Simon from the European Study Program, School of Modern Language and Cultures. And Dr. Roland, also from the European Study Program, School of Modern Language and Cultures. And I have already introduced to you our guest speakers. So, let's go ahead. Panelists, what do you have to say?
Is this on?
Yes.
I want to come back to one of the points that is like in the wake of Samuel Huntington's argument of like the clash of civilization, and now the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. There's been a lot of discussion between violence in between the religions, but if we look carefully at the history and even at current developments going on right now, we see that it's like violence is often stronger within religions and within religious splits. And the Reverend Newman has already alluded to the splits within Christianity, but we can find that these are, that we can see them in other religions too, namely the Shia-Sunni split. And now the question is that, and Rabbi also already mentioned that this is something that is like religions have to deal with. But what I want to ask is, what about these schisms? How do they appear? And why do they turn violent? Why is it that it's like that they are often a core seed to legitimizing violence, enabling violence in the name of religion? So it's like it's to all of you, but it's like basically to focus on these intra-religious violence.
So this question for me or for
everybody? For everybody. So it's like, I'm sure,
because when the topic is violence, then it is always the fingers pointed out to the Muslims. It is not by them, even media and everything. Recently you have seen in Norway, a person has killed many people. And he was a religious person, but nobody raised the finger towards the Christianity. So I agree, it should not be raised towards the Christianity. The same thing if it is happened within the Muslim community, so the name of the religion is used, unfortunately. But what I have mentioned from the source of the religion, that is the Holy Book Quran, and that always emphasize on peace. And I believe no religion can prevail in the world if it has the concept of the violence. Love always brings you to the world, and love and peace concept always gives you life. But if you look at the history, the group who were violent and who adopted the way of violence, you don't see today. So every time the violent people, they have a different group and they have a different name. There is no link with the past, and every violent group or the concept is finished. So if the religion of Islam, being a religion, if it has the concept of the violence, then it would have not long history. And just after it is established in Medina, within a few years, Islam spread in all Arab Peninsula, and after Prophet Muhammad, within 10 to 12 years, the Islam reached to Europe, in the North Africa, in Asia. So if it has the concept of the violence, then it would have not reached to different areas, different people. So my opinion, as the new Wellman has mentioned, that there is a connection. Indeed, there is a connection of the violence with the people, not with the religion. So I am telling the religion when we attribute the religion towards God, God is God for all. It is not God for the Muslim, for the Christianity, for the Buddhist. So God is for all, and God loves to his creation. So God loves, God wants peace, and God wants the mercy and blessing.
So perhaps if I can just speak on this perception about Muslims being more linked to violence than are Christians or Jewish, because one of the reasons why we set up this dialogue is that we realize how widespread is this perception, not only in the Western world, but also here in Hong Kong and beyond in Asia. Why do you think that's the case? Is it for the last 10, 15 years, for those kind of terrorist attacks we saw in New York, Madrid, London? Is it something that goes farther back in history? Is it something that is related to not what is written in the text, but what is preached in the mosques, in the churches, and in the synagogues? Why do you think there is this widespread perception? Thanks.
A good question, but one thing that, as you have mentioned, that there is no blame on the Judaism or the Christianity as compared to the Islamic faith. If you compare with the number of the Muslims, and then you see the violence, what the violence you see in the Israel, and what the violence you see in the different parts of the world by the Muslims, if you count the number, then you will find more violence people in the Judaism, if you are counting the number. But for the Muslims, you know, here in Hong Kong and even in America, the Muslims are living for a long time, but there is no single incident of the violence. So actually the violence, wherever you see, it is the political problem. Indeed, they are Muslims, and Muslims, they sometimes, some leader, they use the religion as a tool. But being a Muslim, if the Islam as a religion teaches the violence, then the violence should be seen everywhere in the world. Whereas Muslims are living in all over the world, and Muslim dominated countries, there are 57, but you find only few countries where there is a violence. And in these few countries, there are few people who are violent, but the reason should be looked, and the reason should be found that what is the reason why they are violent. So basically, if the political problem is resolved and settled, then I believe no one would like to kill, and no one would like to be killed. So the peace is the vice of the nature, and it is for all, and it is by all. It should be.
Taking the same point a bit further.
Like the first. Let some other responses.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd be happy to come back on your question, Roland, about intra-religious violence and why is that. Just a couple of weeks ago in my church, at one of our family services, I was asking the children, how do you do you ever have fighting in your family with your brothers and sisters? And of course they all said yes. If my brother pushes me, then I hit him back, and and it escalates and so on. And I said, do you do that in school? And the answer was no, you don't do that in school, but you do it in your family. And I think partly intra-religious violence is because it's in your family. But to be a bit more serious, I think it's really because it's conflicting versions of truth. And I think that lies at the bottom of a lot of religious violence, full stop. But when it's within your own religion, then there's a tendency in some people to say, if I am right, if my truth is right, then somebody else who thinks differently must be wrong. And so therefore we've got conflicting versions of the truth, and one of them's got to be right and the other's got to be wrong. And that's where the violence comes in.
You want to say something, Rabbi? Okay.
My point was just taking it just one step ahead, that due to this day, we have all these religious leaders with us. I would like to ask how you people representing religion can make a way forward, can make, this is given that we have political issues, we have political problems, and we say that this is all political games and political issues which are going on. But how you can make a contribution to that, being representing these religions towards more harmonization, or towards more peaceful things?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question on. I think that forums such as this and the sort of the creation of neutral spaces. A university is a neutral space. It's a neutral society. So there's a great irony that that I as a Jew over here, we can have this conversation over here in Hong Kong, but if we went to more religious countries, and perhaps even the countries where where the religion is practiced or where the religion emerges from, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation. And I think that's something that really needs to be recognized. The Grand Imam mentioned that in Madrid there was this conference. So why is it that it's okay for Madrid, or maybe okay for New York, or okay for Hong Kong, but perhaps not okay for any other places? And I'm not going to mention the places where it's not okay, because I'm not here tonight to do that. But it's just something to think about. And I think that there is an onus and responsibility on universities and on neutral spaces to teach to teach even the religions how to do this in the place where they emerge. It's somewhat ironic.
I think the university is very willing to take up such a responsibility, but I also think, what about the religions itself? Because the religions itself obviously have the most influence towards your disciple or your believers, and as I just heard some of the comment just now is that it seems religions have an image problem. That, for example, religions are being viewed as the source of violence, but as I have listened to for the past half an hour, that there's no relationship between violence and religions. So what happened to this problem, image problem?
I certainly didn't say there was no
relationship
between violence and religion.
I'm talking about.
And the way you sort of present it as an image problem or as a cosmetic problem, I don't
Okay,
personally I don't agree with that. And I think that there may be substantial problems or substantive problems, but I also think that when leadership gathers in forums such as this and in spaces such as this, then they can go back and let the message filter. In other words, the question always is, how do societies change? Do societies change from the leadership down, or do they change from the bottom up? And I'm inclined to think they change from the top down.
Okay.
And therefore, the university is poised to create that sort of change. And we talk about opening a Centre of Religious Studies and so on, and doing that in a responsible manner will lead to, I think, will in the long term lead to those sorts of changes.
Okay. Panelists, any questions?
I have another question, and it's like,
كما قلت أنا سعيد بهاللقاء. أولا في المقدمة طلب مني أن أتكلم عن حوار، مع أنني أعرف أن العنوان هو عن الأديان أو عن الدين والعنف، فمعذرة لأنه كانت كلمتي مختصرة أو مقتصرة على الحوار كما سمعتم. الحقيقة أيضا أنا سعيد بكل ما دار، وأحب أن لا نكون كلنا نقف موقف دفاع. أرجو أن نقف موقف مشاركة وموقف نتحدث لنضيف لا لندافع. أرجو أن نتحدث لنضيف لا لندافع. أولا كان بودي أن نعرف ما هو العنف. حقيقة كل الذين يتكلموا لم يحددوا ما هو العنف. هل هو الدفاع المشروع؟ هل هو مجرد القوة؟ ما هو العنف الذي تنفيه الأديان أو ينفيه الدين؟ لأن بودي أنا لا أقول أن عندي جواب، لكنني أسأل ما هو العنف الذي نتحدث عنه؟ يعني مجرد القوة أو مجرد حق الدفاع عن النفس أو مجرد يعني أحيانا أسباب قيام الحروب قد تكون أسباب يعني مقبولة غير مقبولة إلى آخره، لكن بودي أن نحدد العنف. ثم أيضا ما قال الأستاذ لماذا يعني في هونغ كونغ ونيويورك وليس في غيره. أولا كما قلت لا ندافع، المهم أن نبدأ في نيويورك أو نبدأ في هونغ كونغ، هذا هو مطلوب. ولهذا الخادم الحرمين الملك عبد الله فعلا انطلق من مدريد وانطلق من أي مكان، المهم أن نبدأ. شكرا.
The Dr. Salih bin Abdullah said that I have been given the topic that importance of interfaith dialogue, but the topic that is given, it is very important. The first and the most important, we should not defend ourselves and we should cooperate each other and we should come to a common point. This is the first thing that we should do. And the second, that we should know the definition of the violence. Only defending ourselves, defending the nation is the violence, or there is some other areas that we should say this is the violent and this is the not violence. So the violence should be elaborated and should be defined what is the violence and where it will start. So then we can proceed further and then we can understand the topic. In this situation that you have started in Hong Kong and the New York has been started, and practically the King of Saudi Arabia, Khadim al-Haramain al-Sharifain, Malik Abdullah, he has started practically interfaith dialogue in Spain and in Makkah al-Mukarramah and elsewhere, and this is the step that has been taken forward by a Muslim ruler of Saudi Arabia.
المهم أن نبدأ لا من أي مثلا، المهم أننا نبدأ سواء من هونغ كونغ أو من أي مكان.
We should continue. We should start this interfaith dialogue whether we are in Hong Kong or wherever we are.
I think he raised a very interesting questions or topic is the definition of violence. Maybe the great Imams can enlighten us on what he thinks of what is the definition of violence.
أنا قلت ليس عندي تعريف. أنا قلت أنا أثير السؤال وليس عندي جواب، لأن الموضوع يحتاج إلى أنا لا أظن أن ممكن نجيب عليه في جلسة، إنما الموضوع فعلا يجب أن نحدد ما هو العنف ثم نتحدث. أنا لا أقول عندي جواب الآن، لكني مستعد أن أثير الجواب فيما بعد.
He is saying that I am ready to answer, but this question is raised by myself. How I can reply by myself? So you should think by yourself, then I will answer.
You want me to help you, or you want me to go on? Go ahead.
Maybe I'll go back to the presentation. One thing I found really interesting is that in all your traditions, I understand, violence is justified in certain specific cases, and one of these is self-defense. Now, because we have witnessed in history violence within your own religions and among your different religions, then perhaps we have a problem about the understanding of what self-defense is, because if here everyone is thinking about acting in self-defense, there is obviously some sort of misunderstanding. And my question is for the three of you.
Can I just add one comment to the same question, taking from your presentation that it's a geographical realities where Jews are like minimum in number, and on the other hand, Muslims are growing up, and it's like a common perception which is coming up that Muslims, they are growing in number and they're becoming kind of a threat to the Christians or being perceived as a threat in the West. So given these realities, how can?
Muslims are growing or not, this is another topic. Like there are some countries where the Muslims are growing, indeed, but there are other facts. Some countries where the Christians are increasing, like in Africa and some the poor countries, the Christianity are increasing. So, in fact, within the religion, the violence, it shouldn't. In fact, as the religion is misused, this is my opinion. And when somebody believes that the solution of every problem is with the power, so then the violence started. So first, and we should realize that the solution of all problem can be settled on the table and with the negotiation, whether it is within the family or within the group or within the country, within the city or within the sect. So if the second, we should see the reason. Again, there are some political reason and some economic reason. I know many countries where the people are taken and to adopt the way of violence just for the money, and they are paid, and they don't see to whom they are killing and why they are killing, but they are paid. So, and again, I can give you, and you are aware, there are many countries where there was a complete peace when the government or the situation, the political situation was changed, the violence started. So it means that the same communities, they were living in years, in hundreds of years, there was no problem. But as the government or the political situation is changed, the violence started. So indeed, there is some fuel that has been put. That fuel is not the fuel of the religion. It is some other, from other forces that they are using these things. So we should see the reason, not we should blame the religion.
But,
Can I come back on two things? The business of the geographical reality. 4 years ago, I visited the Holy Land with a group of Anglican clergy from Hong Kong, and we had one of the speakers who addressed us was a former Israeli Minister of Religious Affairs, and he said, "You have to understand that in this place, everybody thinks that they are the minority that needs protecting. The Palestinians think they are the minority because they are, in their terms, maybe they are oppressed by the Israeli state. The Israelis think they are the minority because they are surrounded by Muslim countries which threaten their existence. The Muslims think they are the minority because they are under attack from the Christian countries. The Christians think they are the minority because in the Holy Land they are a tiny minority. So everybody thinks that they are the minority and they should be the ones who are protected from others. But the other thing I wanted to pick up on is your question, Simone. What is self-defense? And this brings us to, in Christian terms, and to some extent in universal terms, to the just war theory. And one of the necessary causes that allow you to go to war, according to the just war theory, which was developed most notably by a Christian, St. Thomas Aquinas, in the 13th century. He said that you can go to war for self-defense. But how does that work out in practice? When you look at the Iraq war that America and Britain embarked on in 2003. But the part of the justification used by the British and American leaders at that time was that this was actually a war in self-defense. It was preemptive war against Saddam Hussein using weapons of mass destruction against the West. Now, you start getting into complex issues here, because then you're saying preemptive war is a defensive war, you're acting in self-defense, but then Saddam Hussein could also argue that, right, well, I'm acting in self-defense too. So it is a complex issue.
But I have a question here, because that's very interesting, because all of you mentioned that it's each and individual religion is a religion of peace, and it condemns violence, and it holds out the hands to the others. And yet, if we look in every society in the world, we find there's a lot of violence, and not all of that violence is ordained by self-defense. So, for instance, what about the death penalty? The punishment and retribution and justice. When can a religion sanction violence for penal ends? For instance, in most Muslim countries, blasphemy is punished by the death penalty. Now, that does nothing to do with self-defense, but here we obviously have a connection between, the death penalty in countries that use it, that it's that you have done an act and therefore you shall be punished. Now, does that contravene religious norms, or how amenable are they here? And this is, again, different countries have
I would like to answer this question. There is no single Muslim country that has given the death penalty on blasphemy except Pakistan. There is one, even not in Saudi Arabia, and our Grand Imam is here, he will answer you. In Pakistan, there is no single incident that any person is hanged because of blasphemy.
But then why isn't it abolished? If it's an act that is not, there's a big debate going on in Pakistan, and if it's basically a law that is not followed, then why is it not just wiped off the law book?
If you ask from me, there are a debate on this topic. Blasphemy basically is the death penalty for the Muslim. If some Muslim commit the blasphemy against Prophet Muhammad, then he is the subject of the death penalty, but not for the non-Muslim. It is, it is a debate within the Muslim scholars. And so the practical aspect, we should not see only the constitution or the rules, regulation. The practical aspect is there is no single person has been hanged on this penalty, on this punishment, on the blasphemy in Pakistan. But in Malaysia, I have read this, what the constitution was introduced by the British in Malaysia, the same constitution is adopted in Pakistan, in India, still in India the same, and even in Saudi Arabia, in other parts of the world. So they have not changed. Only Pakistan, they have changed in 1980s when Ziaul Haq was the ruling of the country, but practically it is not adopted. It is still in the debate position. Although one of our governor has been killed on this subject by some violent people, but it is not from Islam. Islam says if some Muslim is committing the blasphemy, because if there is the Islamic State, then the court will decide about his fate. So this is the fact.
Just to ask something relating to the same point, that as you have just described, that it's an image thing, it's a reality thing, that how things are happening in reality. There are some other issues as well, where practically they're distorting our image a lot. Image of the Muslims or Pakistan or these countries, they're distorting a lot of image. So I would say where religious leaders cannot be more clear in their voice, more loud in their voice to denounce these things, these acts of violences. We hear these things, but we hear from within our community, but not when we are having an interfaith or when we are having a diverse population. We do not hear these voices much often. In Pakistan, I know, everybody, we denounce these things, but I do not hear these voices when I'm talking, when I'm when there are audience who are from mixed backgrounds. So I would say especially these areas where there is a bigger problem with image. We need more louder voice from the religious leaders.
Indeed, you are right. Indeed, this is the area that needs improvement, and needs for the religious leader to be more educated, and also needs to be more broad-minded, and they should have a chance. When they will have a chance to sit together with the other faithful people, I believe they would have they would be broad-minded, and they would not react as we see. Indeed, these kind of things has given the bad image about the religion, I accept, no doubt. But again, it is not a religion, it is by the people.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to take up what Roland said earlier, if I could just jump in here about blasphemy, because I actually I feel for the Imam, because we, in our tradition, we were also very strict about blasphemy. And it's also God's, I mean, I can't remember what the punishment is, but it's pretty bad. You know, they don't shower you with sweets, and they don't promise you a place in heaven. So I certainly understand where he's coming from. At the same time, I think the idea that somebody, I feel that people should have the right to be blasphemous, and I don't, you know, what I sort of said in my speech was the way that we treat our own heretics is really an indication of how we're going to treat others. And if we can't handle having heretics in our own backyard, then certainly we're not going to be able to handle the neighbor next door. But these things take a lot of time. Religion moves very slowly. There was a time, I mean, you asked that you know, in most Muslim countries there's the death penalty for blasphemy. There was a time when Christians were killing people because of blasphemy. They're not doing it anymore, but there was a process over a few hundred years where this changed. So here the poor Imam is sitting here, and you're asking him this question, and he's you know, I feel that he's trying to sort of deal with it, but there also has to be an understanding that there's a historical process, and a historical process that takes time, and hopefully we all survive before we get to that final destination. But I was also disappointed, I have to say, Roland, that you sort of let that go. That sort of it's okay to be, you know, to be blasphemous within, you know, it's okay for one's own community to take care of one's own people the way they want to take care of them, because I personally don't think that that's okay, and I don't think that that's a way forward. But on the other hand, you have to be sensitive to the historical process that this sort of change would require.
I don't know if there's a wider issue here behind your question, Roland, about the death penalty full stop, which, of course, in many Western countries no longer exists. But for hundreds of years, it did. And the church in the UK and many countries supported that and sanctioned it. And it's only in the UK, I think, at the end of the 1950s, early 1960s, that the death penalty was abolished. And public opinion, liberal opinion, had been moving that way for a long time. And my understanding, I'm ready to be corrected, but my understanding is that it was when church leaders actually started saying, no, we don't actually think that the death penalty is right. That's when the law actually changed.
It's a rare opportunity that we have so many religious leaders here. We have been talking of violence. What about the opposite? What can religious leaders do to promote peace?
You must be a Buddhist.
I am a Buddhist.
If there is a role of the religious leader, then they can play. If they have limited role, then
what about
limited result you can see.
What about within your religions? Obviously, religious leaders are very powerful people, you know. like the Reverend just said, that until the religious people get together and say it's okay now, no more death penalty, then no more death penalty. Now, can we get together and do something like that so that we can promote peace?
We know how much we are powerful. But indeed, like here I can give you example. In fact, sometimes there is curtains in between the communities and the people, and the curtain should be removed. Like in Hong Kong, we have started to visit the churches and synagogues. It was not in the practice before. And also the many Christians, the New Will Man and Dr. John is here, and they are bringing the groups to our mosque. We welcome them. So these things has developed the better relationship with other communities, with other people. So in this way, we can promote the peace and love for each other and respect. We always used to say we should not emphasize to change the mind, the belief and the creed. What we should accept each other with the differences. I know what I have a belief and faith. I know about others what they have the belief and faith. So we should accept with the differences. If we say that first we should eliminate and finish the differences, then we will come together, then it will never be happen. So these things should be taken.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
I'll take it.
Thanks.
I think the key, we've talked a lot about dialogue between religions, and the question is, what is the dialogue for? What are we actually aiming at? I think that dialogue is not just to exchange views. Dialogue is also to get to know each other, and to find out that we are human beings, and to start to enjoy each other's company, and to learn that instead of being threatened by someone who believes differently from me, I'm actually enlarged by people who feel differently, who believe differently from me. And I need to learn that I may have my truth, but other people have their truth. And the fact that I have my truth doesn't mean that someone who believes differently is wrong. That the truth is different for different people, and we have to learn to accept that, rather than trying to push our views on other people.
I think that's very important, that accepting that there are other people in the world believing in different things, and they're gonna still be around for a long time, that we're gonna not eliminate them. And accepting, I think, is very important. Any more questions from our panelists? Maybe we can open the.
Questions, but I think it's like the audience.
Okay, well, we have some time for the audience. Can somebody give them the mic over there? There's that gentleman over there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my great honor to meet this honorable guest. And I'm not a native English speaker, so if I may inappropriate words or phrases, I wish that I may be excused.
No problem.
I think that those guests mentioned that there are violence, which are political issues and economic issues, not necessarily religion. But in some countries, let alone there are religion-governed countries, but even in some secular government countries, there are laws to say that you should not show some religious signs in schools, for example. And these laws are, and those kind of governments are, let's say, closely related to the religions. I mean, in this situation, how should this religion to deal with the political issues to eliminate those kind of violence from your point? Yeah, thank you very much.
Anybody would like to take that question?
In fact, the political issues should be resolved by the political leadership. And indeed, the religious leader can play a role to convince the people, whatever the capacity they have, whatever the voice they have, and it reach to different people. they can play the role. But the important thing is the political leadership should resolve the issue, and the world should cooperate on that issues. I can give you one example how violence started. Violence, as I mentioned, violence has no relation with the religion. In the recent history, you see the suicide bombing started by Tamil Tiger in Sri Lanka, and they had the concept of the violence. Now they are finished. So the violence, the concept of the violence, the activities of the violence is not prolonging. The second thing, the reaction by the people towards a specific group or specific religion should not be different. Like a person come at the airport, he has a beard, he's a different cloth, then he is being searched and he is being humiliated. Indeed, maybe one person will bear, another person may show the violence or react with the violence. So if a specific group is targeted or specific names are targeted, then these kind of problems started. So the political leadership can resolve these kind of issues, and then the peace can be prevailed and the peace can be maintained.
Okay, there's questions over there. Wait. Your mic is not working. Okay.
I have to repeat that again. I have a short statement to make as an audience, and second, I have a question for Rabbi Arshad. First of all, I've been here for almost 2 hours, and I can't appreciate what's the grassroots of violence. None of you can present it. I'm sorry to say that to your disliking. And the question is, what has the Holocaust to do with Palestinian uprooting the land and making a Jewish state?
That's an excellent question, and it's a question that many people have asked, and I welcome that question. So the Jewish connection to the land of Israel didn't begin after the Holocaust. The Jewish connection to the land of Israel began thousands of years ago, and that's just a historical fact. The attempt to create a political homeland in the land of Israel began way before the Holocaust as well. What the Holocaust did for the Jews and for much of the world was to bring about the realization that that the Jews require a solution of a home to live, and they require a place where they will be able to take care of themselves, because the world wasn't willing to take care of themselves. And so Jewish survival at this point in 2010, 2011, Jewish survival is now intimately tied up with the state of Israel. And Jews feel that any attempt to destroy the state of Israel is actually an attempt to destroy Judaism and the Jews themselves. Whether that perception is correct or not, that is deeply ingrained, and I personally think that there is some truth to that. So I hope that goes some way toward answering your question, and I do welcome your question. So thank you.
Okay, there's questions over there with this gentleman. Right here.
Thank you very much. I'm expressing my appreciation for all the presentation and the questions raised by honorable professors. I have one question and then one comment. The question is, when Maulana was saying, ask the politicians, not the religious leaders, I wonder when this distinction was made. Because what I have known, in Islam, religion and politics the same. Why do we want to avoid to grapple the situation. I think every religion has something to do with politics. I don't know how the violence started in Pakistan, came out of madrasas. Why don't we accept it and try to see how we can cope up with that? My comment is I completely agree with Imam that blasphemy law, there is nobody who was hanged in Pakistan. But everyone who has been accused of blasphemy was killed by the mob. Thank you.
Thank you for raising the question. May I answer?
Yes. Please go ahead.
I always welcome the question, but with answer. Indeed, there is no difference in Islam with the politics and the religion. And the religion of Islam has politics and also the religion, practice of the religion. But when the religious leadership has the power, when the political decision is in the hand of the political leadership, how they can play the role to implement by a religious leader. The second thing, the political leadership in some time, they used the religious leaders and religious people for their political purpose. In 1980s and the end of 70s, you know, being a Pakistani, he's the bishop of from Multan, and the religious leader, they were used. So this is now the result of the mistakes that was taken, the mistakes by the politicians at that time. So indeed, and the second question, the terrorism or the extremism is from the madrasa. I'm not telling by myself. There is no link. Whatever the violence you see, if you study case by case, you will see they are all graduated from the normal universities and they are from developed countries, not from madrasas. And even today in Pakistan, whatever the violence, it is not from madrasas. Madrasas' task is only teaching what is in the Holy Book Quran, what is in the practices of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So, but I agree, the time when the religious leader or religious people were used by the politicians, and the result of that, now we are looking at inside Pakistan. So it should be stopped. And like in Afghanistan, it was a political game, but the religious people were used as a tool. And on the name of religion, they were equipped with arms. And who gave them arms and who used them, and when the war is finished, where they have gone. So this is the actual problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah. There's yes, please.
Hello. Thank you. My question is to the distinguished panel and to the guest speakers as well. Tolerance is probably directly proportional, related to violence. A Western society banning the veil and the hijab for Muslims, women in the society is a sign for not tolerating a person who would like to dress and would like to dress according to the will and according to the religion, and why it has been banned and why it has not been tolerated, taking that into account that they were using it as a pretext that it was against, they could not identify and relating that as a terrorist and not as a security problem. Well, there are many people are sitting here with caps and beard and hijab. You can't relate them all in the same manner. That's it.
I think there are several issues here. I think there is a genuine fear about security issues. I don't think that's just a pretext. I think that's a genuine fear in some societies that should be taken seriously. I think there's the other question in my mind, and I would be very happy to hear an answer to this, is wearing the veil or the hijab, is that really a religious thing, or is it really a cultural thing? Because when Westerners visit a country like Saudi Arabia, then we would be expected to dress in an appropriate manner, in a modest way, perhaps more so than in our own societies, because things are different in different societies. So then, is it reasonable that when people come to the West, then they should also dress in a manner that's more like the West? That's my question.
Okay, maybe another question is up here. Oh, yeah, okay.
Good evening. I'm Carola from Hong Kong SGI, so practicing Buddhism. Thank you very much for being on the panel tonight. We meet on a regular basis in our interfaith community here in Hong Kong. I'm so happy that you've taken it to the university and hosted this event tonight. My question is, we made religion as a foundation for, the problems with violence, but is it not human nature that is the problem? And several of you mentioned that it is the individual, and you can never take the responsibility away from the individual for their conduct in society. We have a principle that we say, if you bow to a mirror, the mirror will bow back, which means if you show respect to the people in your community and you engage in dialogue, then quite naturally there will be trust and friendships formed. And I think what we are seeing today with the press and the evilization of Islam, because anybody that does anything wrong, the first question is, oh, was he a Muslim Islamist terrorist? Even in Norway, where there was obviously no connection, the first question was, they're now checking whether there was any Islamist connection.
CNN was telling the same.
Yeah. So my question to you is, how can we further encourage, because obviously participants here believe in dialogue, otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting in the same room together. How can we bring it from this room outside into the different communities?
I think that's a good question. So, anybody want to elaborate on that?
As I sort of, I don't know how I got to answering the question here, but as I sort of said earlier, I think just more of these sorts of events, and I think we are here, and I think if we can find a way to live together over here, then maybe some of that can spread elsewhere. But I do think that we should remain focused on the challenges and the communities that we have over here. And I don't think we should be importing problems from elsewhere. And I don't think that exporting. I don't think that importing problems from elsewhere helps us at all. So.
Okay, so we should learn to live peacefully among first, and then maybe export that later on. Okay, and this gentleman.
I'm sorry. Can I
sorry,
make mention of an organisation called the Hong Kong Network for Religion and Peace, which Kala is a member of, and other members of the audience here. this is an interfaith organization. Imam Arshad has also been to some of our meetings. We meet in different places. Sometimes it's in John's Cathedral, sometimes at the mosque, sometimes at Buddhist or Hindu centers or Baha'i. And we talk about matters of faith. And we exchange with each other, we learn from each other, we enjoy each other's company, we find out how much we agree, and we also find out the points where we may disagree. And it's it has its website, Hong Kong Network for Religion and Peace. John will know the website address. But you can look it up, and you're welcome to come and join our meetings.
Okay, maybe one more question from this gentleman.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm really nervous right now, but I have two questions. My first question would be to Reverend. Why did St. Paul mention sexist comment in 1 Corinthians? What do you think? And my second question is, I thought about this question when you talk about blasphemy, and I thought about the incident in the Danish newspaper when they draw a cartoon of Muhammad wearing bomb instead of turban, and I knew that after that incident, some people died in a European nation because of that caricature. So, what is the, in your opinion, what is the boundary of the freedom of expression and the blasphemy? So, and do journalists have a right to commit blasphemy in the name of the freedom of expression? Thank you.
Thank you. You were nervous. Some of us have been nervous too. I can answer your first question easily, I think more easily than the second one. About St. Paul and his comments on women. I think you have to take into account the society at that time, where in many ways women were in a second-class situation, and Jesus was quite exceptional in talking openly with women and talking with women he'd never met before. There are examples of that in the Bible, and everyone looked at him and said, "Why are you talking to that woman? You know, she's nothing to do with you." So there was at that time. We're talking about a time when women were in a secondary position, perhaps in some ways. So maybe that goes some way to explain St. Paul. You'll have to remind me now of your second question. Yeah. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know where the limits should be. We've talked about individuals having responsibility. Well, I guess even journalists have to also take some responsibility for their actions. Of course, the problem is that what they say or what they show or print is so widely distributed that it reaches a very wide audience very quickly these days. I don't know what the answer is.
Okay, you want to say?
Yeah, I'd just like to take that up. You know, there's a difference between blasphemy and meanness, and you can be blasphemous without being mean, and you can be mean without being blasphemous. You know, a cartoon of Muhammad with a bomb in his turban, besides it being just blasphemous, it's just mean. And we hope to create a society where people are not mean. You know, so it's complicated because we want a society where people, I certainly want a society where people can say what they want and can think what they want. But within the synagogue, I'm not going to preach that people can say what they want. I'm not going to preach that blasphemy is acceptable. So it's about sort of striking this balance. There'll be a broader society out there. There'll be universities where blasphemy will be acceptable. But in our own synagogues, and in our mosques, and in our churches, God forbid, blasphemy should never be be acceptable. And journalists should have the right to say whatever they want and whatever they think, but they should do it responsibly and in a way that is not mean. And that's something else to sort of think about, as we try to work out the solution to that problem.
Okay, I'm sorry we ran out of time. And I must thank for all the great the guest speakers, especially the great Imams coming to speak for us. Okay, one moment. Go ahead.
Good evening. I just have small questions.
Yeah.
Actually, I find the injustice here for these presentations and for overview. They figure out only for the Muslim and they show only the negative side for the Islam. But I want to ask clearly questions for the Christianity and Judaism. They are promoting the peace and tolerance, but we look around a reality in this world. Who is the leader of the religious and who is the suffering in the Philippines, in the Thailand, in the Palestine, in the China, Uyghurs? A lot of Muslim community are suffering and no multimedia, no channels, because the Muslim, they don't have even the technology, this unfortunately. The second, if you see the nuclear, which the countries has nuclear? There is only Pakistan have nuclear because the Indians. All the Muslim country, they don't have nuclears. Who's promoting the peace and who's promoting the violence? Please, I want to get the answer from the two guys here. Thank you so much.
I've never felt such brotherhood.
What you say is true, of course. There are oppressed Muslims in the Philippines, in Palestine, and so on, in China, and it is almost all the Western countries that have the bomb. Actually, that's not completely true unless you count Russia as Western. Yes, our countries are responsible for violence. As I mentioned right at the start, Christianity is something of an ideal. Jesus gives us an ideal, and the job of religious leaders is to keep pointing to that ideal. But it's a very, very hard ideal to live. We try to show, we try to encourage, we try to give ideas of how people can live up to this ideal. That's what I spend my life doing, and trying to live up to it myself. But I don't always succeed. Nobody always succeeds. So we have to face the reality of violence.
Okay, thank you again. Obviously, we had a good time, and I'm sorry for all those people that still have questions. And I think my last comment is that we all agree that violence is not good, it brings suffering, and then peace is obviously good. But I think eventually, ultimately, that is up to the individuals. Our own responsibility. How can we bring peace within ourselves, and then with that peace within ourselves, then how can we promote that to the people around us and within our religions, obviously, hopefully, to our politicians, and ultimately, hopefully we can have more this type of discussions, and we can bring more peace to the society and the whole world. Thank you again.
One comment.
Please go ahead.
On what you've just said, which is a quotation from a Russian saint, Saint Serov, who said, "Create peace in yourself, and thousands around you will be saved."
Yes. Okay, thank you very much again. Hope to see everybody again in the future.